So this was the era that Bertrand Russell was born into, where Darwinianism had been pushed out by the Royal Society of England, London, a high Freemasonic scientific society, who was really under the Darwinian guise of evolution, pushing the ancient religion, inner religion of Freemasonry, which is really basic Hinduism, because Freemasonry goes with Hinduism exactly along the lines that we just sort of evolved from amoebas into little animals and slammed up the mud banks and then just through various chances, etc., in billions of years, we sort of arrived at where we are. And of course, we're not stopped at the moment. We've got a great leap forward to go through for the new man, for the new age, which is Aquarius, and we're right here now, you see. This is where we're coming up to. So this all ties in together. So here's a little bit from Bertrand Russell, Lord Bertrand Russell's own autobiography, one of the first volumes published, actually. The later ones, I don't know if they're exactly the same. So he said that my father, Lord Amberley, had recently died after a long period of gradually increasing debility. My mother and my sister had died of diphtheria about a year and a half sooner. My mother, as I came to know her later from her diary and her letters, was vigorous, lively, witty, serious, original, and fearless. Judging by her pictures, she must have also been very beautiful. It didn't rub off on old Bertie here. My father was philosophical, studious, unworldly, morose, and priggish. Both were ardent theorists of reform and prepared to put into practice whatever theory they believed in. My father was a disciple and friend of John Stuart Mill, from whom both learned to believe in birth control and votes for women. Because John Stuart Mill, you see, was a top economist, and being in the know and the plan and a high mason, etc., they had to double the workforce by getting women into it, destroy the family unit, and bring in mandatory abortion, which has all been accomplished since then. He says, my father lost his seat in Parliament through advocacy of birth control. My mother sometimes got into hot water for her radical opinions. At a garden party given by the parents of Queen Mary, the Duchess of Cambridge remarked in a loud voice, yes, I know who you are. You are the daughter-in-law. But now I hear you only like dirty radicals and dirty Americans. All London is full of it. All the clubs are talking of it. I must look at your petticoats to see if they are dirty. So that's the type of radicals we're looking at. We're looking at an aristocracy within the aristocracy with a mission. And it does also tell you that Queen Mary, the Duchess of Cambridge, was not in on the ultimate plan, which makes sense in Freemasonry because the one at the top is irrelevant. The front man is not important. It's number two that is important. It's the guy behind the Prime Minister or the President that's important. So those behind know the plan, while often the one at the top does not. So it's interesting to read that Bertrand Russell was a friend of John Stuart Mill, who believed in a world run by experts like himself, on an economic system run by experts, a fixed family planning world over, where you would not be born unless they had a function for you, and where the elite would decide what you would work at, and you'd be trained from school simply for that task. This is in fact the Soviet system, because you see the same aristocracy created and were behind communism. They created both systems, and that's why both systems run along the same path. Today we have school to work, which is the Soviet system, so it's here, people. Now, Albert Pike, who was the Grand Pontiff of Freemasonry in the late 1800s, also called his organization, and he boasted about it. He said the World Revolutionaries. He says we have, meaning the Freemasons, of course, had been behind every world revolution. And he was very proud of it, and modern Masonic books back that up. Albert Pike trained a man who started a revolution in Italy, whose name was Mazzini, Giuseppe Mazzini. Now, Mazzini is just a sort of Italian version of Mason, so that probably wasn't his real name. But he stirred up revolution in Italy because the idea was to unite the countries under one central government and then unite the central governments into one world government. But that was to come later under the League of Nations and then the United Nations. This is what Bertrand Russell says about Mazzini, and it shows you the ties. Now, Mazzini pushed what appeared to be the communist cause. Mazzini gave my mother his watch case, which is now in my possession. My mother used to address meetings in favor of votes for women, and I found one passage in her diary where she speaks of the Potter Sisterhood, which included Mrs. Sidney Webb and Lady Courtenay as social butterflies. So what you're seeing here are really it's the same system, of course, as Illuminati, where they had one sect for the males and the females that would go out into society to create social organizations, led again by people in the upper classes, and the people followed them. So here's Bertrand Russell, who's a British lord who was given the watch case of Mazzini. Now, Mazzini's organization was called the World Revolutionary Party, which was a branch of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, set up by Albert Pike. The guy who took over from Mazzini was Lenin, and they turned it to the Bolshevik Party. So here's the tie-in with the British aristocracy, the royalty, with communism. And they needed the masses to believe in them, that it was for the working man. And through many front organizations and front speakers, they conned the masses into this. They kept Britain from rioting by giving them a Labour Party which they themselves had set up. And through government, you see, and the setting up of what they call democracy, they expanded bureaucracies, which is the real government. The bureaucracy is government. The bureaucracy is never elected. People work in different bureaucracies their whole life on a single mission, which they know, regardless of what political party is out in front. So the political party really is the front organization to keep the public amused and debating and hot-headed about, while the bureaucracies know what their missions are and they work fervently towards it. This is what it's really all about. So the whole thing was to get the public from where they were, which was an industrial era, forced industrialism, which had through the laws, like the Corn Laws that were passed in England and put through by Lord Rothschild, which dumped cheap grain in Britain and put the farmers out of work. Then the farmers were all pushed into the cities. The cities now had the manpower to create the industrial revolution, and on we go with heavy industry. They also had wars going full time, of course, because you got to use industry for war machines, and it killed off the population too, because the average person didn't live much over 25 if they made it that far, working in factories for 16 to 17 hours per day for a pittance which didn't even buy you rent money. You often slept in the factory, and you could barely eat because they were kept at starvation levels. That was Great Britain in its heyday, you see. That was the British Empire. So the British Empire certainly looked after the ones who owned the empire, but it used as chattel those beneath it.